Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Akhandamandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Ekam Shastram Devaki Putra Gitam Eko Devo Devaki Putra Eva Eko Mantrastasya Namani Yani Karmapyekam Tasya Devasya Seva. Namaste. So now we are doing the 6th chapter today onwards. Today we will do shlokas 1 to 9, the first 9 shlokas of the 6th chapter. And I have titled it, The Mind, One's Enemy as Well as One's Friend. It's the predominant theme of today's talk. So very briefly recollecting what we have done in the first 5 chapters. The first chapter begins with Arjuna's confusion and unwillingness to fight. And then in the second chapter onwards, Sri Bhagavan begins to speak. He begins by pointing out that the living being is an Atma, Jivatma living in the body. The living being is not this body. The body is temporary. It's going to die after some time. It undergoes transformation, whereas the living being, the Jivatma, does not undergo transformation. It's eternal. It just changes bodies. And therefore, the Jivatma's real happiness, his eternal happiness, lies in coming out from the material conception of the body and understanding his true spiritual nature. When one understands their true spiritual nature and thereby connects with God, based on that spiritual nature, when one connects with God, who is the supreme spiritual being and who is eternally happy, then one experiences that form of happiness. So building on that, Sri Bhagavan shows that there are multiple paths which are broadly termed as yoga. So within yoga, we have karma yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, dhyana yoga. So these different terms all refer to one common stream called yoga, and yoga has multiple qualities. It requires the person to practice certain types of qualities in themselves. So the second chapter, third chapter, and the fourth chapter, as well as the fifth chapter, all of them touch upon these different qualities. And finally, in the sixth chapter, Sri Bhagavan has reached a point where he has explained what karma yoga involves. And he now points out that based on karma yoga, the advancement made in karma yoga, one can progress to either jnana yoga or ashtanga yoga, dhyana yoga. The sixth chapter is predominantly focused on introducing the idea of dhyana yoga or ashtanga yoga. So as we go forward, I'll get into more details. The first shloka of the sixth chapter is like this. Shri Bhagavan Vacha, Anashritaha karma phalam, karyam karma karoti yaha, sa sannyasi cha yogi cha, na niragnit na cha akriyaha. So Shri Bhagavan says, in the Gita, Krishna is addressed as Bhagavan, Shri Bhagavan Vacha. So we are also referring to him as Shri Bhagavan. Anashritaha means not taking the shelter of. Karma phalam, the fruits of one's work. Karyam karma karotiha, one who does their prescribed duties. Karyam karma means the work that one ought to do. Karotiha, one who does that work, sincerely does their work without taking shelter or being attached to, means being detached from the fruits of the work. A person who does that, such a person is a sannyasi or a yogi. He is called a sannyasi or a yogi. Sa sannyasi cha yogi cha. Na niragnihi na cha akriya. Not a person who does not do his work. Here, niragnihi means literally one who does not light his fire, because in the Vedic system, Brahmana is supposed to do Agnihotra every day, right? So that is his prescribed duty. So here that word niragnihi or agnihi is used as a metaphor to denote doing one's prescribed duty. Nacha akriyaha, a person who does not do any work, who just sits quietly and says, I am a sannyasi. Such a person is not a sannyasi. So some of the meanings I wanted to highlight in the first line actually is talking about the essential principle of karma yoga, which is to do one's work with detachment. Now, this question was asked in the last class, and it frequently comes that how can one, if somebody is detached from the fruits of their work, then what can motivate them? Why would they be motivated to do the work? Because after all, the motivation for doing work comes from the fruits. Okay, so what do we mean by fruits? In very simple terms, let's say we're employed in an organization, doing a job. Then the fruits of the work are the salary we get, right? The money that comes to us every month, the promotions we get, so the money increases, the status that we get, the reputation that we get among our peers in society. So these are all the fruits of doing work. So if someone is detached from them, means someone does not look forward to the happiness that comes from them. Instead, they say that, no, this is not my source of happiness. Then why would they at all want to do work in the first place? Okay, that's a very logical question. Now here, the answer, it's exactly what the last 3 chapters I've been talking about, that one's sense of happiness comes from something higher. Because in yoga, you are aware that there is a supreme consciousness, which is called God. Some people think of God as just an impersonal energy, but a fuller understanding of God is God as a person. Just like we are persons, God is also a person, and he has the full consciousness. We have partial consciousness. We are conscious of our bodies. We are conscious of things in our immediate surroundings. Or maybe with the help of some devices, we are conscious of a little more than our immediate surroundings. But that supreme being, which we call as God, is conscious of everything. Okay, so connecting with that supreme being is the goal of life. And therefore, a person who is doing yoga sincerely is actually anticipating that happiness. And that is how he becomes detached from the happiness of the fruits of work. Okay, that is fine. Then why should he do work in the first place? Why can't he just sit down and meditate on that consciousness? Why do any work at all? Why be in a job? Why earn a salary? Right? That's a logical question there. So the point is, Sri Bhagavan says in the 3rd chapter that you are not qualified for that. Not everybody is qualified to just sit quietly and meditate on God. Because in countless lifetimes, this is not our first lifetime. We are not coming into existence when we took birth in this lifetime. Okay, that is where the Bhagavad-Gita begins. The first instruction is Bhagavad-Gita is that Sri Bhagavan says that so many lifetimes both you and I have had, but you don't remember all of them. I remember all of them, he points out. So through all these lifetimes, we have undergone so many material experiences. We have become attached to matter that all of a sudden, if somebody says, I want to now stop doing everything and just meditate on God overnight, it's not possible. The mind will not be able to focus on God. So he tells Arjuna that if you do that, you will be a mithyachari. You will be a pretender. You will only sit and pretend that you're meditating on God. Your mind will actually go to all material things. You will think of, your family. You'll think of your anxieties. You'll think of some political things, or you'll think of simply your food and your shelter. You will not be able to think of God all the time. And therefore, you must work. Doing your work sincerely is the way to focus the mind, is the way to tame the mind. And as you do your work, as you continue to do your work, also think of God, also meditate God along with that. And think of God as the person who is the person who deserves the fruits that you're getting from your work, which will anyway come, because if you do your work sincerely, the fruits will come even if you don't want them. So use those fruits in his service, offer them to him. And by doing that, your consciousness will develop towards him. So this is the principle of karma yoga. So here in the first line of this particular shloka, the 6th chapter, first shloka, the first line talks about karma yoga. The second line is the sannyasi. The word sannyasi in the second line refers to jnana yoga, or the person who's doing jnana yoga, the jnana yogi. Because what is jnana yoga? Jnana yoga is when, after doing karma yoga for sufficiently long time, a person's consciousness has been purified by practicing detachment, that his hankering for enjoyment, sense enjoyment, has come down, and his hankering for realizing God has become stronger and stronger. His attachment to God has become deeper and deeper. He has reached a point where he can genuinely come out of work. He can genuinely give up his work and sit and meditate. At that point, somebody becomes eligible to take sannyas. And sannyas means giving up work. So he says, such a person who has reached that stage can do karma sannyas. Until then, he cannot do. And therefore, the essence of sannyasa is actually not about leaving work. It's about being detached from the fruits of work. That is the essence of sannyas. And he says that is exactly the same thing which is the essence of yoga also. Yogi, in the sixth chapter, the word yogi will be used to refer to the dhyana yogi, the people who follow the path of Ashtanga yoga, the eightfold path of yoga. So there, a yogi will engage in meditation. He will sit all the time and he will prepare his body by doing the yogasanas and then pranayama, pratyahara, etc. He'll prepare his body and mind to meditate on God. And eventually, he'll do dharana, dhyana, and so on. So to do that, one goes through the preparation process, okay? And there the karma yoga acts as a base. So he says a person who acts with detachment is the real yogi. And that is how it should be understood, not a person who gives up everything and then tries to pretend that they are a sannyasi or a yogi. So so this is what I was explaining just now. So karma yoga is the basis for these two. So the translation for the first shloka of the sixth chapter, Sri Bhagavan said, one who does their prescribed work without attachment to the fruits of that work or without desires to enjoy sense objects is a sannyasi and a yogi, not one who abstains from their prescribed work nor does anything. Okay, some of you might wonder why I've spelled it as sannyasin or yogin and why is it spelled like that in some books. It's because when we represent Sanskrit words in English, we take the base word of that word. The base word for sannyasi is sannyasin. It's a nakaranta shabda in Sanskrit. Similarly, yogi is yogin, and that base word is what is put in English. Second shloka continues from the first one. Yam sannyasamiti prahuhu yogam tam vidhi pandava nahi asanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. So what yam sannyasamiti prahu, what is said to be sannyasa, tam vidhi, tam yogam vidhi pandava. So think of that or understand that to be also yoga. What is called as sannyasa is synonymous with what is called as yoga. Both essentially are the same. Nahi asanyasta sankalpaha. One who has not given up. Asanyasta means one who has not given up. Sankalpa. Sankalpa means the strong desire to enjoy this material existence. Such a person, na yogi bhavati kaschana, can never become a real yogi. So very similar meanings as what I was describing for the first shloka. Sannyasa means freedom. The word sannyasa is normally used in language to refer to freedom from attachment to fruits of work, giving up all work, etc. Yoga refers to a person with a calm and undisturbed mind. In the Yoga Sutra, in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, the second sutra of Patanjali is Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, means yoga. Patanjali defines yoga as the complete stopping. Chitta Vritti means the transformations of the mind. The mind is continuously producing thoughts. All the time, the mind is producing different types of thoughts. The waves of the desires are flowing through the mind all the time. So yoga, according to Patanjali and according to the Gita as well, is about a calm and undisturbed mind. A mind in which the thoughts are streamlined. The thoughts are under the control of the person who experiences them. And so this particular shloka, the second shloka of the sixth chapter, shows the synonymity or the oneness between the essence of sannyasa and the yoga. And therefore, and they're connected to karma yoga. Karma yoga is the base for them. One does not become, this is very, very important for us to understand, that one does not become a sannyasi or a yogi merely by a change of appearance. One's appearance, external appearance, has nothing to do with being a sannyasi or a yogi. It's the mentality. It's all about the mentality, internal mentality. So externally, one may appear like anything. Could be a very normal appearance like anybody else, but internally, they may be very detached. And only by interacting with them over a sufficiently long period of time and observing how they go through different situations in life can one really understand what their mentality is. One cannot infer just by their appearance. Okay, so there is a very small story which comes to mind. There's a story of two men. One of them is a young brahmachari. Okay, and he's walking along with his companion, who is an elderly sannyasi. Okay, so brahmacharya is the first stage, a young person when he's uh, you know uh, performing his duties before his marriage, he's practicing celibacy, and consciously a brahmachari stays away from the opposite gender, right? Because he doesn't want to allow his mind to be disturbed by unnecessary thoughts. He wants to groom the mind before he becomes a grihastha, before he gets into the grihastha ashram. So brahmachari is being told by his guru that you should not go near women, you should not play with women, you should not loosely behave with them. When you see a woman, you must respect her. Think of a woman just like your mother, etc., etc. This is a training for brahmachari. Okay, so he's walking with a sannyasi, and of course, a sannyasi goes without saying is not meant to associate with women at all, right? So they are walking and they come to a river. As they're walking to their ashram, and there's a river they have to cross. So when they reach the bank of the river, they find a young woman there. Okay, so this young woman is standing there and she's wanting to cross the river, but at that point of time, the river is having some turbulence in it, and she doesn't want to risk crossing the river alone. So she's just waiting there, hoping that somebody else will come and she can take their help and cross the river. So these two people reach there. And so immediately she turns to them and she requests them, can you help me to cross this river? So the brahmachari immediately, he becomes very cautious, he becomes very alert, and he looks away. This girl, this is a young woman, and no way he's going to go anywhere near her. So then the sannyasi, immediately he smiles at her and says, of course, I will help you. He says, come, hold my hand. So he extends his hand and she holds his hand, and he starts walking across the river with her, and the brahmachari follows. And the sannyasi, as they go across the river, they reach the middle of the river. The river gets deeper and it becomes more turbulent. The sannyasi is a strong person, so he holds her very tight to his body so she doesn't fall, and he helps her to cross the river. And they both cross, and the brahmachari is just following. And after they cross the river, they're all on the other side. They're safe, and the woman, she thanks the sannyasi. She offers her respect. She touches his feet, and she goes away in her direction. And these two people, they go towards their ashram. So as they go towards the ashram, the sannyasi is lost in his own thoughts. But the brahmachari, he is now completely disturbed. So in his mind, he's thinking, what happened? This man, I have been worshipping him almost like my guru, and he's a sannyasi, and he's not supposed to touch a woman. He's not supposed to talk to a woman. He's not supposed to. And he held her so closely. He held her tight, and he was walking across the river. What is this? How can I accept this? I mean, he's not able to sort it out in his mind. He's completely confused. So he's thinking like that. And all the time, his mind is visualizing that sannyasi holding that young woman in his hand. And after some time, because he's not able to control it anymore, he bursts out and he asks this sannyasi that, Maharaj, can you please help me to understand this? I'm feeling very disturbed. So he puts forward his doubt to him. And then the sannyasi just looks at him and he says, oh, you're still thinking about that woman. I thought she was gone long back. In my mind, she no longer is present. But in your mind, she's still there, which means you're holding on to her all the time. So then the brahmachari realizes his mistake. So sannyasi and brahmachari or yogi, all these are just mentality. This is about the mind. In the mind, the thoughts that we have, the way we think about this world, the way we perceive the world, that determines what spiritual advancement we have made. So this is something that we learn early in the Gita. And the Gita is all about the change of consciousness. It's the change of mentality. It's not about the change of the body, external body. In course of time, of course, bodily changes will also happen, but that is not the focus. Arurukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchyate, yoga rudhasya tasyaiva shamaha karanam uchyate. So all this links back to the original doubt that Arjuna began with. Arjuna says, I don't want to fight this war. I can't kill my relatives. It looks like something is seriously wrong here. I would rather go and become a sannyasi. I would rather live by begging than killing these people. So he says, Arurukshor muner yogam, Arurukshuhu, Arudha. You can see here, yoga rudhasya. So there are two words used here, arurukshuhu, arudaha. In Sanskrit, just like in Hindi, we have a word arohan. Arohan means what in Hindi? Elevation, right? Rising, going up, going upwards. So arohan means going up. In Sanskrit also arohanam, going up. Arurukshuhu means one who wants to go up, go upwards, one who wants to make progress, one who wants to elevate themselves. Arudaha means one who has already elevated themselves, one who has already gone up, elevated, advanced, progressed to a certain level. So here, first line says, Arurukshoho munehe yogam karma karanam uchyate. So a person for whom the path is just beginning, he wants to elevate himself. For him, karma karanam uchyate. He should do his work. The work is the means to elevate oneself, essentially. By doing work sincerely and with detachment, one elevates themselves in the beginning. But yoga rudasya, one who has already made progress, one who has done that sincerely for some time, tasyaiva, for the same person, shamaha karanam uchyate. Shamaha means giving up their work or refraining from work. So one has done karma yoga for sufficiently long period of time, then they become eligible by their purification to give up their work and then do meditation. For a practitioner who desires to advance in yoga, that's called yoga arurukshuhu. The performance of prescribed karma is said to be the means, while for the one who is already advanced in yoga, yoga arudha, stopping the performance of karma or stopping their work is described as the means. And there also there is a choice. Yadahi nendriyartheshu na karmasu anushajyate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yogarudas tadochyate. So if you ask the question, okay, I understand what is meant by arurukshu, a person who is beginning, who has not made any spiritual progress, that is easy to understand. But then what is the qualification of a person who is yoga arudha? How do you know somebody, or how does somebody know for themselves that they have now reached a point when they can consider themselves as yoga arudha and they can stop their work? So he says, Yadahi na indriyartheshu na karmasu anusajyate. When one finds that they have reached a point when they are no longer carried away by the objects of the senses and they are no longer attached to that particular work that they are doing. Okay, they have developed sufficient detachment and they can experience that internally. They can sense that within themselves. At that point of time, sarva sankalpa sannyasi, such a person who has actually given up everything. Okay, he's not disturbed by the different objects of the senses. Such a person is yogaruda. He can understand that he has become a yogaruda. So whether one wants to judge oneself or wants to judge another person, this is the criterion. Now, very often it's difficult to judge a different person, another person, because we don't know what is in their mind. Okay, and we shouldn't try to also. Why should we? We should focus on judging ourselves. We should reflect within ourselves and see where we are and judge, okay, how much extent. For example, I was thinking that I should have ice cream today, but I didn't get my ice cream because something happened. There was a store was closed or somebody came late. I missed the ice cream. How much does that disturb me? Am I disturbed by that? Or I can just say, okay, I'll have ice cream some other day. If it's as easy as that, that means there is some level of detachment. Okay. So I give a very simple example. So now we can extend this example to any other situation, whether it pertains to, the promotion that I was supposed to get, or the car I was supposed to buy, or anything which is normally considered an object of my enjoyment in this world. Okay. To what extent are we dependent on that object of enjoyment for our happiness? To what extent is sense enjoyment the standard of our happiness? To what extent does our happiness depend on sense enjoyment? That is the measure of the extent to which we are yoga rudha or we are not yoga rudha. Okay, that is the criterion. When one has no attachment either for the sense objects or for the work done in the pursuit of those objects and has freed themselves from the desires to pursue material enjoyment, then one is said to be advanced in yoga, yoga rudha. Uddharet atmana atmanam, na atmanam avasadayet, atmaiva hi atmano bandhuhu, atmaiva ripuratmanaha. This is a very famous shloka in the Bhagavad-Gita. It talks about how the mind is both a friend of a person as well as the enemy of the person. And there are two shlokas which come together, the fifth and the sixth shlokas. Bandhur atma atmanastasya, enaiva, enatma, ena Atmaiva atmanajitaha. Enatmaiva atmanajitaha. Anatmanastu shatrutve varteta atmaiva shatruvat. So what does it say? Let's go word by word. Uddharet. One ought to uddhar karna. Uddhar means kya? Elevate karna. Uddharet. One ought to elevate. Atmana. By the self. Atmanam. By the mind, one's own self. Atmanam. So the word Atma is used in two meanings here. Atma can mean the mind, the intelligence, the body. It's used in different senses in Sanskrit. Here in this shloka, the word Atma is used in two meanings. One meaning is the mind, the other meaning is the self, oneself. So, Uddharet Atmana, by the mind, one should elevate oneself. Atmanam Uddharet. Na Atmanam Avasadayet. One should not allow the self to become degraded. Avasadayet means degradation. Na Atmanam Avasadayet. One should not allow the self to become degraded. Atmaiva hi Atmanaha Bandhuhu. Atma eva. The mind is certainly the friend of the self. Atmanaha bandhuhu, the friend of the self. Atmaiva ripuhu atmanaha. Ripuhu means enemy. The mind is also the enemy of the self. Okay. So it looks like a contradiction. He's saying the mind is the friend of the self and the mind is the enemy of the self. How come? So the sixth shloka answers that. He says, Bandhuhu atma atmanaha tasya yena atma eva atmanajitaha. For one who has conquered the mind with the self, with himself, means with his own internal will, by his own initiative, yatna karke, by his own efforts, by conscious effort. The mind won't be controlled just like that. By itself, automatically it won't come under control. The conscious effort, one who has disciplined one's mind. Okay, for such a person, the mind is a bandhu, is a friend. Anatmanastu shatrutve varteta atmaiva shatruvate. For one who has not done that, the mind resides with him like an enemy. Shatrutve means resides in enmity. Like an enemy. Shatruvat means like an enemy. Okay, so imagine that there is an enemy in the house who resides there not in a friendly manner, not in a manner that, okay, he's an enemy, but he's behaving like a friend, he's acting like a friend, he's actually my enemy. No, this enemy is residing like an enemy only. He behaves like an enemy also, does harm. Okay, so the mind of a person who has not disciplined the mind resides in himself like an enemy doing inimical activities. Sri Bhagavan points out. That's why these two shlokas are very, very important shlokas. And they are the build-up to Dhyana Yoga. Because before you get into Dhyana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, you must know all these things so that the role of the mind is understood. Actually, there's an enormous amount of literature, both in our Eastern philosophy, in our philosophy, Hindu philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, and in Western philosophy as well, on the role of the mind. But in very simple terms, controlling the mind is a matter of habit, right? Regardless of whether somebody wants to pursue knowledge about God, spirituality, or somebody just wants to live a happy material life. Okay, even if somebody doesn't want to pursue spiritual life and doesn't believe, that's fine. But you want to live a peaceful material life. Everybody wants to live peacefully in this material world, right? And you have aspirations, dreams. Everybody has some dream or the other. At least, even if not, you don't want to build a big company. You don't want to be an entrepreneur. You don't want to be a sportsman. If you want to be those things, then definitely you have to control your mind. Without controlling your mind, you cannot achieve anything big in your life. But even if you don't want to do that, you want to live peacefully, you want to just be a salaried employee in some small organization, get a monthly income, and be happy that way. Even then, you have to bring your mind under control. That's the point being made here. That whatever way it is, if you don't do that, the mind will always be disturbed. And what is the best way to control the mind? The best way to control the mind is, again and again, this comes in the Gita, is to live your life through routines and habits. Okay, cultivate habits, positive habits, which elevate oneself. Okay, for example, something as simple as exercising. Okay, you don't want to become a sportsman. Okay, when you start exercising, somebody will come and tease you. Kya Olympics खेलने जा रहे हो क्या? People will ask you questions like that. Okay, so that suddenly then people are watching me doing exercise. How can I do this? I should go secretly. So inhibitions start coming. No, you don't want to be a sportsman. You don't want to play Olympics. That's fine. Just do 10 minutes of exercise every day and make it a habit. It's not about the quantity, it's about the habit. It's about consistency. Simply doing that, you will start seeing how a certain level of happiness starts coming inside, from inside. Okay, simple habits. So living life through habits and filling up one's life with habits and routines is an easy way to control the mind. Okay, one doesn't have to do very complex Ashtanga yoga. Simple habits are enough to discipline the mind for people like us and bring it to a place where the mind becomes our friend. Very interestingly, in Chanakya, you see, this controlling the mind is such a universal concept that nobody has, avoided it. Even somebody like Chanakya was a politician, right? Effectively, he wrote on politics. But even there, he's saying, Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. Bandhaya vishaya sango muktyai nirvishayam manaha. So it is the mind, mana eva, it's the mind only. Manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoho. The reason for the cause of bandhanam means bondage and moksha means liberation, bondage and liberation. For both bondage and liberation, it's the mind only. Bandhaya vishaya sangaha. Becoming attached to the sense objects is what leads to bondage. And nirvishayam, becoming free from that attachment to sense objects is the cause for mukti. Muktyai nirvishayam manaha. So through the mind, one becomes attached to sense objects. Through the mind, one becomes detached from sense objects. Both happen through the mind only. So he's saying that depending on how we drive the mind, we end up with either bondage or with liberation. And we can choose that. One must elevate the self with one's mind and not allow the self to degrade. The mind is verily one's friend as well as one's enemy. The mind that has been conquered by the self is the friend of the self, but of the self that has not conquered it, the mind is like an enemy that bears enmity. Jitatmanaha prashantasya paramatma samahitaha shitoshna sukha dukkeshu tatha manaha manayoho. So now the next three shlokas where Sri Bhagavan builds on whatever he has said so far to say, okay, one who has become a yogaruda, one who has now controlled his mind, what are that person's qualities? Okay, such a person has matured in karma yoga and is ready for either becoming a sannyasi and doing dhyana yoga or becoming a yogi, ashtanga yogi and doing dhyana yoga. So what are the qualities of such a person? Jitatmanaha, one who has mastered the mind. Prashantaha, prashantaha means he's become very peaceful. His mind has become calm and peaceful. Param atma samahitaha, the mind has reached a stage of samahitaha means samadhi, become a trance-like state, a meditative state. The mind has become param samahita. Param samahita means extremely peaceful, extremely in a trance-like state. So he lives his life in a trance-like state, a very calm, peaceful mind, controlled mind. Okay, so when we hear this, we should not think that such a person has become numb or has become insensitive or become completely devoid of all feelings. This is not samadhi. Samadhi is a state where one is very alert, one is very sensitive, one becomes much more conscious and aware of reality than one is otherwise. Okay, samadhi is a state like that. Samadhi is not a state of numbness or a state of, becoming unaware of everything, switching off from everything. No, it's a state in which you are fully controlled, fully alert, but at the same time, completely detached. It's a very, very nice state to be in. Param Atma Samahita. So in that state, what does the person experience? So in that state, Shita Ushna, cold and heat, Shita Ushna, Sukha Dukkha, happiness and misery. Okay, pleasant situation, Sukha. Dukkha means unpleasant situation. Tatha Mana Apamana. Mana means a place, situation when one is respected, man. Apamana means one is insulted, respected and insulted. Okay, so in all these contrasting situations, hot, cold, pleasant, unpleasant, respected situation, disrespected situation. In all these situations, one becomes equanimous. It doesn't matter because one is beyond them. One treats them equally. Okay, one's mind is so much aware of the presence of God. One is so much aware of one's identity as beyond matter that these things don't disturb one. One becomes aware of them. One is aware of them, but not disturbed by them. One becomes equanimous towards them. One whose mind has been mastered and is calm and undisturbed by material desires remains in an exalted meditative state, even in contrasting situations such as heat versus cold, pleasure versus pain, respect versus insult. So one becomes neutrally disposed towards all of them. Eighth shloka, Jnana Vijnana Triptatma Kutastho Vijitendriyaha. Yukta ityuchyate yogi, sama loshtashma kanchanaha. So building on that, similar qualities, Jnana Vijnana Triptatma. His person is very content with Jnana. Jnana means theoretical knowledge, the knowledge that we read in the textbooks or in the Shastra, like Bhagavad-Gita. So when we study the Bhagavad-Gita, for example, like we're doing now, we are theoretically learning this, right? We are not realized. We don't realize it immediately after we hear it. So we theoretically know that there are concepts like this. Vijnana. Vijnana means realized knowledge. Jnana, Vijnana. Theoretical and realized knowledge. He is content with both. He is not in a state of argumentation. He doesn't have any doubts. His mind is very clear. Kutastaha. Kutastaha means one whose mind has become very condensed or drawn inside, who has withdrawn from the external disturbing things, who is withdrawn within himself. Vijitendriyaha, one who is mastered, Vijita Indriyaha, mastered the senses. Okay. Kutastaha also means one whose disposition is very similar, like we heard in the last shloka. Yukta ityuchyate yogi. Such a person is called a yukta. The word yukta is used for that person. Yukta means appropriate. Ye yukta hai, means yes, ye theek hai, sahi hai. That person is situated in a proper state, appropriately situated. Yogis, sama loshta ashma kanchana. Okay. Loshtam. Loshtam means mud. Right? Ashma means a rock, a stone. Right? So whether it's a lump of mud or a rock, a piece of stone, kanchana. Kanchana means gold, piece of gold. So for that person, they all look alike. I mean, when I say they all look alike, it's not that his vision has become impaired or something. He knows the difference between them, but he doesn't get carried away by any of them. He doesn't distinguish between them. For him, the piece of gold has as much value as a piece of stone or a piece of rock. He doesn't run after that gold. Right? He will treat it like as good as anything else. So a yogin who is content with both theoretical and realized knowledge, who has an unchanging disposition, who has conquered his senses, and who treats a clod of earth, a rock, and a piece of gold equally, is said to be properly situated, yukta, in yoga. Suhran mitrar yudasinam, madhyastha dveshya bandhushu, sadhushvapi cha papeshu, samabuddhi vishishyate. So he becomes samabuddhi. Samabuddhi means equally disposed towards different types of people. So how does he socially relate with different types of people? Okay, politics. Does he do politics? Does he favor somebody? Does he become, does he try to be inimical towards someone else? So samabuddhi. Towards what kind of people is he samabuddhi? Suhrit. Suhrit means a person who is a very intimate friend. Okay, a person whom he knows very closely. Say since his childhood, he has grown up with that person. He discussed so many secrets with that person. He knows that person's secrets and he has shared his own secrets with him. That's a suhrit. Mitram. Mitram means a friend in general. Okay, an acquaintance, a person with whom you don't have any enmity, a friend. Suhran Mitra Arihi. Mitrar Yudasinam. So Arihi is a person with whom you have an enmity, a person whom you might think is someone you have to stay away from, or a person who you think will harm you. Okay, Arihi. Udasina means a person from whom you're very neutral, completely neutral. It doesn't matter, it's like any person on the street. Madhyastha. Madhyastha means in an argument, suppose there is a dispute, some kind of a dispute, and you are on one side, the other person is on the other side. Madhyastha is a neutral person in that dispute, an arbiter, a person who arbitrates in a dispute. Madhyastha. Dveshya bandhushu. Okay, a person who has dvesh, a hatred against you, a person who consciously wants to harm you. Bandhu, a person who wants to help you, who's a well-wisher. Dveshya bandhushu. Sadhushu, person who's a saintly person. Sadhushu. Papeshu, a person who's very sinful. Okay, so basically this shloka is telling us varieties of people with whom we have contrasting types of relationships and contrasting perceptions. Towards all of these people, this person who has advanced in yoga is a samabuddhi. He sees them equally. So any of them comes to him, he will deal with them in a just manner, in a fair manner. He will not be partial towards somebody and harmful towards another person, will not be inimical towards another person. Samabuddhi vishishyate. Such a person, he stands out. Such a yogi who has reached this stage, he stands out. Okay? So this is what the Gita is teaching. If we follow the Gita and develop this in our life, you can imagine how much peace it will give us. Okay, living like this is the definite way towards becoming more and more peaceful. Distinguished among such persons is that yogi who treats equally an intimate friend, an acquaintance, a harmful person, an indifferent person, a neutral person, a person worthy of antipathy, a relative, a saint, and a sinful person. So these are the first 9 shlokas of the 6th chapter. And after this, the 10th shloka onwards, Sri Bhagavan gets into the process of Dhyana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. He talks about what kind of elements are involved in meditation. He says that he should go to a secluded spot and how he should prepare his asana and so on. So we will go there in the next class. So summarizing what we saw today, there are certain items that we can take away from this. We should be very cautious about accepting someone as a sadhu. Okay, reading the Gita, because we are now getting exposed to knowledge. Most people don't read the Gita, right? They don't know what it is. They all respect the Gita. Everybody says Gita is great. There's a lot of, Gita is the greatest scripture, Hinduism is the greatest religion, all these kind of things we hear, but nobody really knows. Very few people really read it and understand what is inside it. And we easily accept somebody who, dons an appearance of a sadhu as a sadhu. Somebody may have a beard, or someone may have matted hair, or wear saffron clothes, or conduct themselves in a particular manner, talk in a particular manner. We accept them as sadhu and we get very often carried away by them. We become their followers. Okay, I've personally been through some experience like that in life, so I'm speaking from experience now. But what the Gita teaches us in hearing shlokas like this, we realize that we should be very cautious. Okay, there are people who are very genuine and there are people who are not so genuine. Once in a while, we come to know about a sadhu who has been caught by doing some crime. We hear of these things also. So we should be intelligent. Gita gives us this intelligence about how to discriminate. Okay, and interestingly, there's a very nice story also in the Panchatantra. Okay, the Panchatantra, we all know as children, we read, Amar Chitra Katha, we read stories, we were told stories in school. And the common understanding of a book like Panchatantra is it's meant for children. It is children's stories because children can't hear philosophy. And therefore, they're told stories of animals, moving around in the forest. But actually, the Panchatantra is not for children. It is for grown-ups like us. It has very deep message in it. Right? Children there is used in a metaphor sense. There, Vishnu Sharma, the author of Panchatantra, he speaks to children. But actually, the word children there is not meaning children. It means people who are beginning their education, or people who don't know something, who are just beginning to know it. They are called children. Okay, so we are all children in that sense. We are learning something. We're just beginning to know these things. So in that sense, we're all children. So it's actually for adults like us. So what is the story that I'm referring to? The story is about a jackal. Okay, there's a jackal. And this jackal is normally in a forest. And so once he's not able to get any food in the forest. So he's very hungry. So he goes out of the forest and he's looking for food and he's straying here and there. So he suddenly finds himself on the outskirts of a town. And so he's hopeful now there's a town here and there are houses, so I'll get some food. So he enters the town. And as soon as he enters the town, there are some dogs on the street, right? And as we know, dogs, they can't tolerate another animal coming there in their territory. So as soon as they see him, they start chasing him. So fearing his life, the jackal panics and he just runs. He runs blindly. And as he's running and trying to save himself, he suddenly finds himself in front of a house. It's actually a washerman's house. And so quickly he enters the door of the house and protects himself from the dogs. So he goes inside and it's dark in evening, dusk beyond entering darkness. So he can't see, he just runs inside and he falls into a big tank which has been kept for dyeing clothes. So the washerman has prepared a tank. Next day he's going to dye clothes there. It's blue color liquid dye. So he just falls into the tank. He falls into the tank and somehow he holds himself together. He's ensuring the dogs don't come and eat him up. And he just remains there for some time. So as he remains there, his body becomes covered with the dye. And he remains there for a long enough time to ensure the dogs are gone. And then he comes out. So he comes out and he finds that his whole body now looks blue in color. It was originally brown or something, but now it has become completely blue in color. So he comes out slowly, very, very fearful. He looks around, the dogs are not there. So slowly he starts walking towards his forest. He wants to just get back to the forest. So as he is walking, the dogs again come there. And this time, the moment the dogs see him, they just turn and run away. Then he realizes that something has changed. Why did they look at me and run away? He looks at himself. He's now blue in color. So he says, they haven't seen a blue animal before. That's why they ran away. So he goes into the forest. He's now feeling very embarrassed. What will the others think? My body is blue. What will the other jackals think? What will the other animals think? So he enters the forest. And as he enters the forest and walks inside, one by one, the animals, the moment they see him, they turn and they run away. All the animals, so no animal wants to come near him. The moment they see him, they get scared and they run away. So he starts thinking, okay, now my blue color, instead of me being embarrassed, actually, I can take advantage of this. His jackal mentality comes out. So he thinks of an idea. He calls all the animals. He says, look, please don't run away from me. I'm not a fearsome creature. I'm actually a divine creature. I have been sent by Lord Brahma. Brahma himself, I'm coming from Brahma Loka. Brahma wanted me to come to you and give you his love. He wants me to tell you how to live happily in this forest. Please listen to me. Please come. So he calls all of them, and seeing him talk like that, because they've never heard any animal speak like this. Okay? No animal comes and says, I'm coming from Brahmaloka. So they never heard an animal speak like that. And looking at his appearance, he looks totally different from all of them. So they come, they listen to him, he gives a talk, and then they bring him food. And then they give him a place to stay. They say, don't worry, Maharaj, we will take care of you. You just give us your advice. And because of you, your presence has now made us all very happy and peaceful. So now this jackal begins to enjoy his life. He no longer has to hunt for food. He doesn't have to go anywhere. Everything comes to him. And every day he's enjoying luxurious meat. The softest and the best meat comes to him. The animals are bringing it, the lions, the tigers, the elephants. The animals that he was scared of are now all falling at his feet. Suddenly one day, when this is going on, there's a sound nearby of some other jackals. They are all howling. Okay, so jackals howl, no? Just like dogs, they howl. So once in a while, there's a howling sound, and suddenly once there is this howling sound, and this howling sound goes on for some time. And this jackal's nature, you see, every jackal's nature, just like dogs, when they hear other dogs or jackals howling, naturally they also feel like howling. It's natural for them, right? They don't have to be told. They don't know why they're howling, but they will also howl along with them. So this jackal, upon hearing that howling sound, he starts howling. He gets up and he also begins to howl. He keeps howling. Now the animals look at him and they say, oh, this is a jackal. It's not at all what we thought it was. So they come to know his true nature. Immediately they pounce on him and they kill him. Okay, his life is over with that. So this has a very deep lesson for us. The story is told in the Panchatantra just to point out that don't go by somebody's external appearance or their external behavior. A sadhu is not somebody who just dresses up in a sadhu's clothes or speaks something different. That is how in today's age this is called Kali Yuga. Because most of us are not trained in Shastra. We are not trained in Shastric thinking. We don't know what Shastra says. We have the potential to get carried away by anyone who speaks something different from what we know. Because we don't know that. We don't know about any of these things, right? We don't know Sanskrit. We've never studied Sanskrit. We don't know what the Shastra says. Somebody comes and speaks something Somebody looks different from us, we immediately say that, okay, this person must be a great sadhu, right? And so we have to be careful. Contemplate on the larger picture of reality. Bhagavad-Gita teaches us to understand that reality is not what we see around us. There is much more than that. And one's importance in that. One is just a small, insignificant part of that reality. Okay, one plays a role, one has a role to play, but one should also know that one's role is just one insignificant part of the roles that everybody together plays. And that supreme being, whom we call as God, plays in it. Live a life with simple thinking and high living. Simplify one's thinking through critical reflection of one's wants and desires. This is something that in every class we say that this is something which the Gita cannot put in explicit terms. We have to borrow from it and decide for ourselves. We have to decide what exactly is my want. How much do I really need? How much do I not need, but I'm just accumulating? Prioritize one's choices carefully. Live life through habits and routine. That's particularly something that the 6th chapter highlights. Practice tight engagement, minimize looseness. Okay, from one thing, the next thing, the next thing. Don't allow the mind to go here and there. So this is rich life. This is real richness. Study spiritual texts like the Gita, meditate upon God. A logical text after Gita is the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam builds on the Gita. And contemplate on Sri Bhagavan as one's dear friend, well-wisher. This is what the 5th chapter was telling us. The 5th chapter ended with the shloka, right? Who is always eager to guide the one who is sincere and genuine. Okay, so this is a very practical things. The Gita is not a book of merely philosophy. It is very deep philosophy with very practical implications, very practical actionable items. So for today, I will stop with this much, and I'll be happy to take your doubts, questions, anything that you want to say or ask. Om Shanno Mitrasham Varunah Shanno Bhavatvaryamam Shanna Indro Brihaspati Shanno Vishnurukramah Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayo Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahmasi Tvameva Pratyaksham Brahma Vadishyami Rutam Vadishyami Satyam vadishyami tanmamavatu tadbhaktaramavatu avatu mam avatu bhaktaram. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.